That's not a reboot. That's not a reboot. That's bro. Okay, let's do this. I get the feeling no one knows what a reboot is anymore. Too many people keep using the term for everything, and while it's annoying when the average person does this, it's even worse when the media uses the term and doesn't do its due diligence to find out what the term actually means in the current context, and instead just jumps onto the bandwagon. A remake is recreating from already existing source material. The thing is, it updates the material for contemporary times. Remakes usually follow the same story structure as well. An example would be The Wizard of Oz. The 1939 one was a remake of the 1910 silent film. The story is the same, but it was updated or converted to fit the late 30s aesthetic, being in sound instead of being silent, and beyond, having half of it being in color. A reason to have a remake is while there may be a vague awareness of the original by the general public, typically people don't go watch films, TV, or read books or any material that came out before they were born just for fun. This keeps the IP in the public eye, even though the odds are the general audience won't go back to see what came before this newest iteration. Now for Reboot, you're readapting from already existing source material, and while you may follow certain beats of the previous work, you change just enough elements so it's its own animal. An example would be the Spider-Man films. The first Amazing Spider-Man film is a reboot and not a remake because while it retells Peter Parker's origin, it changes major chunks of it. The tone is decidedly different, but more important, it uses characters and changes situations, the story threads, to the point that it can be considered different. The Amazing Spider-Man was shot with a darker filter. It also doesn't have the brighter colors or fun comedic edge that the original films did. Also, The Amazing Spider-Man had Gwen Stacy, Captain Stacy, and the Lizard in its main cast. The original didn't. The Amazing Spider-Man films as well had a story thread that focused on Peter's parents. That never comes into play with the original films. So let's take a look at a couple projects that people consider reboots and dispel them. The recent Fuller House series isn't a reboot. It's a sequel or continuation to a series that ended over 20 years ago. It still carries all the continuity that the previous series had and is furthering the story put forth by the previous series, much like Star Wars The Force Awakens. Also, that isn't a reboot. It's a direct sequel to Return of the Jedi. It also uses different characters and has a different story. Well, okay, it does follow several story beats from the original trilogy, but that doesn't have anything to do with it whether or not it's a reboot or not. That's just lazy writing. Calling Star Wars The Force Awakens a reboot is like saying A New Hope is a reboot. It's not. It's a sequel or a direct continuation. The same thing goes for Ash vs. the Evil Dead and the X-Files. All are continuations, not reboots. Now, these next films are reboots. Star Trek 2009, it's actually pretty clever how they rebooted it. It uses time travel and alternate realities, and voila, it's a reboot. That said, it did get a bit problematic when in the second film they tried to rely on the original Star Trek lore again. But then again, this seems to be a thing now with J.J. Abrams. He directed both Star Wars and this Star Trek film. James Bond is a bit complicated though. Yes, Casino Royale did reboot the character, but it's also a remake of a 1960s film and a 1950s British TV production. But since the Broccoli family didn't produce those two versions, people overlook those films feeling that they don't matter. That does make me think though. Star Trek and James Bond were rebooted as a way to get people energized about the properties and get newer, younger people to start seeing these films, and it worked. Kinda. See, yes, there is a new James Bond and Star Trek fans, but there are only fans of the recent films. If you were to ask them, odds are they haven't or won't go back and see any of the previous films. So it's a double-edged sword for the studios. Keep putting out continuations of the IP, and at best, the only people that will pay to see it are the older, aging fans, or reboot it, and those fans will more than likely hate you, but you will get even more new fans. They just won't go back into your catalog and buy anything retro. And then there's the Ghostbusters reboot. Now it gets even more complicated. From everything we hear about, it's not a remake. which makes sense considering this has different characters than the original, and the actors aren't just playing female versions of the original characters using the same name and everything. Except that the more information and trailers that are released, the more it appears that this movie is rehashing every plot point from the original and only adding in marginal things. It doesn't help that the living actors from the original are appearing in this film, but not as the characters they played originally. Well, hopefully people will stop using the word reboot as a catch-all word because it means one thing, and to continue using it the way people are is just incorrect, unoriginal, and lazy.